Today's scripture comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 19 to 34. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abram's son. Abram was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan-aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two people born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Amen. Let's pray. Father, we come before you, we empty our hearts and minds to be filled by your love, grace, and word. Speak into our hearts because we need your voice. And I pray, may the word of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your eyes, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen.
Come and speak to us, come and renew us, come and live through us, Emmanuel. Grace to implore us, ever before us, come and restore us, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Love that begins us, pardons and wins us, come and reign in us, Emmanuel. Come and speak to us, fill and renew us, come and live through us, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Grace to implore us, ever before us, come and restore us, Emmanuel. Emmanuel. Emmanuel.
My two children, Luke and Phoebe, though they share the same parents, they are quite different. And I think you saw this with your own children as well. For example, physically, Luke is much like me, skinny body with small butt. Only 25 percentile among his peers. He eats little, just a few scoops, and gets off the kitchen table, which makes me crazy. But personality-wise, he is easygoing, easy to negotiate except eating. On the contrary, Phoebe is not skinny, but chubby and heavy, 95 percentiles among her peers. Though she is only 10 months old, she wears and shares the same diaper with her 3-year-old brother. She loves eating, definitely. Whenever we put her on the high chair and put the food, even before she sits there, she reaches her hand, grabs the food, and put it in her mouth. Whereas we worry about Luke eating less, we are concerned of Phoebe eating too much. Lastly, her personality, she is so determined. If she doesn't get what she wants, she screams. Just so when she sees her parents or her brother eating something, she begins screaming, "Ah! Tell me what? Give it to me! I want that!" Same parents, two very different kids. And they fight all the time. For example, when Phoebe grabs something and Luke sees it, he rushes to his sister and takes it away from her, and she begins crying. Even if previously he paid no attention to that thing whatsoever. But the funny thing is, Phoebe does it again. She tries to touch and grab what her brother plays with, and same drama repeats. And I was so frustrated and even tired of this same drama happening over and over again that I said, it's like, why do you even care? To look, it's like, why do you even care? But it happens again, and it's something called curiosity and sibling rivalry. And we see the same thing happening in today's text between Jacob and Esau. More correctly, Esau and Jacob, because Esau is the firstborn. Although they share the same parents, Isaac and Rebekah, they are so different. First, physically, verse 24 says, the first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. On the contrary, Jacob was a smooth man, not hairy, probably not red like Esau. Second, their personality was quite opposite. Verse 27 says, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. And verse 28 says how this played out in the family. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And it makes sense because, the more you spend time with a child, the more you become fond of the child. And the issue here is not simply difference, but dominance. Jacob, being younger than Esau, wants to take dominance over his brother. Because, as Amy Willis, professor of religious studies at Lynchburg College in Lynchburg, Virginia, points out, quote, the firstborn son typically takes on his father's profession, succeeds his father as the family patriarch, and inherits a larger portion of the family goods than his other brothers. The younger sibling would have to depend on the mercy of the older brother or make his own way in the world. End quote. And Jacob, he hated this. Because who likes to be an underdog? All the time. No one. Also, he has done nothing wrong except he came out later than his brother. Maybe it's like 10 minutes later. But that difference, that time made all the difference. It made all the preference and even dominance. And as you may notice, we are now in the story of Jacob. And beginning with the creation story in Genesis, we heard and thought about Abraham and Isaac. And for the next several weeks, we will listen to the story of Jacob, whose another name is what? Israel, which has become the very symbol of God's people. Surely, Jacob is an important figure, a towering figure in the history of Israel. For example, Abraham takes how many chapters in Genesis? How long is the so-called Abraham narrative? About 13 chapters, from chapter 12 to chapter 25. Well, how about Jacob? Jacob's story is half of Genesis. 25 chapters, including the story of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph and his other children. He dies because he dies in chapter 50. That's the end of the Jacob narrative. In other words, he is an indispensable figure in the history of Israel. But my question is, do you like it? Do you like Jacob? I didn't. For years. Actually, I hated him because he is a trickster. He's a deceiver. As you see in today's text, he steals the birthright from his brother Esau, and things will get even worse as we move on. Yet, the problem is, God blesses Jacob, and he becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. And those 12 tribes of Israel are basically Jacob's sons. Then why and how did it happen? Why Esau lost his birthright and Jacob received the blessing for which he initially was disqualified? To answer to those questions, I will focus on each person and draw lessons from their failure and success. So the first person I want to focus is Esau, and the lesson I want to share is this. We better not be driven by instant gratification. We better not be driven by instant gratification. The story clearly states Esau's problem. Verse 34, thus Esau despised his birthright. And why? because it's given. Since birthright is given to him, he didn't take it seriously. He even exchanged it for a stew that would gratify him instantly, but only momentarily. And it is always the sense of loss that teaches us, that awakens us to the value and importance of what we have taken for granted. When we lose it, we know we come to have the sense of how important that thing was. For example, when I was little, my mom used to ask me, it's like all the time, do you like your father or your mother? You know that question, right? And the answer to that is what? I like you, both. Or even better one is, I like you, Mom. Because that's what she wants to hear. And I'm not being political, but being clever in how to survive in the world. But I told my wife, I told my mom, and it's like 9 out of 10, I like my dad more. Because I did. Then, during my military service, I realized that I was an absolute idiot. I missed her terribly every day. I felt so sorry for her for what I have said and did to her. But unless something or someone is lost and taken away from us, we don't know how important that person is, how important that thing is. We take it so lightly that it becomes almost nothing to us. And that's the problem with Esau. It mattered less than a stew, less than hunger. Tim Urban, in his TED Talks, Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator, says, inside of human brain, there are two. One is rational decision maker, and the other is instant gratification monkey. And we know we ought to make rational decision based on facts and reason, but that's often not the case. We are driven by desire, driven by a monkey trying to instantly gratify our desire. And you remember the story of bird in the cage that would not push the blue button to bring a female bird in the cage. Instead, he pushes the red button to give him cocaine and instant euphoria. Until when? Until he dies. And it's easy to dismiss Esau, what he has done, giving up his birthright over a stupid stew. Esau said, I'm about to die. Or what use is a birthright to me? But we know it's not true because he's not dying. Actually, he's just saying, I'm hungry. But we better be honest with ourselves and see ourselves, because it's the kind of decision we make every day. When we wake up, when we have time, the question is, what am I going to do? Am I going to go after the things that will gratify me instantly, or am I going to delay it and do something difficult but definitely beneficial in the long run for my body, for my career, and for my family, and for my soul? That's the question we have to always ask. And the second person I want to focus, and the lesson I want to share, is this. We better long for God's blessing. And let me make a case for Jacob. First, he is an underdog. perpetual second class. Definitely not his father's favorite. And it is not only the family dynamic, but also the entire culture and society that taught him, you are the second class. Second, yet he is determined to upset the status quo, even before his birth. Afterwards, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. The name Jacob comes from the Hebrew word either Yaakov, which means to follow, to be behind, or Yaakov, meaning hill. In other words, he was determined to catch his brother. Third, God's blessing meant everything for Jacob. The focus of this story is not his trick. It's not his fight. And it's not even his cunning for dominance, but his relentless desire for God's blessing. That's the point. God's grace. As John Wesley rightly says, grace is God's undeserved favor. It is Jacob's longing that God valued high. And this understanding of grace may go contrary to our own, because shouldn't more virtuous, more pious people be blessed? Right? Shouldn't they be more successful than those who treat and deceive others? That's why I hated Jacob. But now, I don't anymore. Because when I see him, I see myself. I cannot possibly say that I'm better than him. He's just being human. So I hope today's story brings you good news, not confusion. Because it shows God prefers underdogs and tricksters. Not because they are perfect, but because they are weaker and imperfect, but still long for God's grace and God's blessing. Therefore, let us long for God's blessing and grace, not dominance, and see how God changes and blesses imperfect people like us. As John Newton, writer of Amazing Grace, once said, I am not what I ought to be. I am not what I wish to be. I am not what I hope to be. But by the grace of God, I am not what I was. Amen. Let's pray. God, chaos is everywhere. Our body, our mind, and our soul is unfit and needs to change. Not only that, we feel like we are underdogs and there is not much we can do to change. Yet we long for your blessing, your promise for our lives, though we are imperfect and full of sin and deceit like Jacob. Give us patience to wait for something better to come, rather than gratifying desires of our flesh all the time and heading towards destruction. Grant us your unfailing love and grace, not dominance, so that we may declare and demonstrate your goodness and mercy in our lives. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.